Hey, what's up DIYers? Mike Boards with the Mike Boards channel. Thank you for watching. Hey, we're back at it working on boats today, and in today's video, the proper way to grease the grease fittings on your outdrive. And there are benefits to doing this. In other words, if you don't do it, well, that's not good. Let's go out to the boat and get started. DIYers, here we are at the workstation, and on the other side of my mom and dad's jet ski is the workbench, as you can see. And a special thanks to my mom and dad for allowing me to bring in the jet ski for the winter for DIY repair videos for all of you, the DIY community. And in today's video, we're going to grease all of the grease fittings on our Alpha 1 Gen 1 outdrive. Making our way around the jet ski, and we've got projects always going on here. 1996 Dyno Air GT, famous GT mag wheels, gum wall tires with the GT tread. We're gonna clean that up. New decals, re-chrome, everything. That'll be fun. And to the workbench. Jet ski repairs, boat repairs, as you can see right here. However, in today's video, we've got Quicksilver Marine Grease 24C with Teflon, and this is an 8-ounce tube. We have our exact operation and maintenance manual, and then we've got this little cool Quicksilver grease gun. There's the part number, and for your convenience, down below in the comment section as well as the description section will be a link on where to purchase this grease gun, as well as this 8-ounce Marine Grease 24C, which will actually screw in right there. Let's go and open it. However, real quick, before we open up the package, I did want to turn the package upside down and show you this helpful additional information on the back side, again, of the packaging itself. And I recommend reading that. I did want to show you that in this video before moving on. And to our manual, I'm going to go to page 23 because we need to reference number 6, and it reads as follows: all grease fittings, universal joints, engine coupler and spline universal joint shaft, Quicksilver 24C marine lubricant. And again, Marine Grease 24C with Teflon. That is the importance of following your exact serial number service manual to ensure you're putting the proper grease inside your grease fittings on your outdrive. At this point, I have unpackaged the grease gun. As you can see, it comes in 2 parts. It's got the entire housing, the trigger or handle and grip, as well as the hose. Rated to 4,500 PSI. Check that out. However, I want to come back to this info on the back of the packaging and talk about these bullet points at the very bottom. And the first one is when cutting off the nozzle seal, make sure the tip is cut off squarely and close to the shoulder of the threaded end so that the end will not bottom out in the adapter. And they are referring to the tip on the 8-ounce tube. I'll show you that now. Next, I laid the grease down on the workbench and I took the cap off, set it aside. There it is right there, you see. And I am going to transition to my Craftsman utility knife and do my best to make as straight of a cut as possible right there and cut off the sealed tip portion of our 8-ounce tube. And again, right where the thread begins, and by cutting at that exact location and removing all of this portion of the sealed cap, it will not bottom out when it is screwed into the fitting in the grease gun itself, as shown there. Very important step. At this point, DIYers, I've got the camera set back to give you a better view of this section of the workbench where we will be working. I'm going to grab the grease gun, and again, it is spring-loaded here. Check that out. And the tip portion where the thread is, we are going to grab the hose, and this side of the hose that has the thread is actually going to thread into the tip of the grease gun, and do not cross-thread this into the grease gun. And you're going to hand tighten it first and then grab a 1/2-inch wrench and continue tightening it and securing it without over tightening it. Opposite end is what will actually connect onto and mate with the grease fittings on the outdrive. And what I'll do, or what I recommend, is actually grab the hose and keep it stationary and maneuver the grease gun in a way where it can actually screw on extremely easily and efficiently. Do not cross thread this into the grease gun. Hand tighten it, and again transition to the 1/2-inch wrench as shown here, and do not over tighten this, but you want it snug. And as you can see, I'm still a little offset. I'm going to continue tightening it, but again, do not over tighten it. Right there. That is as tight as I want it to go. Pretty cool. I'll set that aside, and I'm actually going to bring the grease. And again, I'm going to use my Craftsman utility knife. Be careful as you cut this tip. The last thing you want to do is cut yourself. And with the utility knife and grease in hand, again, I am going to come all the way to the flush portion or beveled up section where the thread begins. As you can see, I can do this and the blade stops right there. I'm going to cut as straight as possible through that entire sealed cap portion. And again, do your absolute best not to cut yourself. In addition, as you cut this, you don't want to apply too much pressure on the tube itself as you cut, because then it's going to shoot grease out, and that's not what you want. That will make a mess. And make sure you have a sharp blade. That will go a long way. Just apply some pressure and carefully cut through it. Don't apply too much pressure. As you see, I'm just going real slow. Let me focus the camera. Again, go slow. There we go. Look at that. And a nice clean cut. Little grease sticking out right there, but that's okay. There it is, look at that. Zoom the camera out just a tad. And from here, I'll grab the grease and the gun. And again, right there underneath the grease gun itself, do not cross thread this in. And just carefully screw it in. I'll scroll out just a little bit more. And again, go slow. Make sure that this thread is properly aligned to alleviate cross threading. And this gun is specifically designed for 8-ounce tubes like this. How cool is that? Do not cross thread it. Basically just like that. Look at that. Pretty awesome, right? Set that down. Store my utility knife. Throw the cap away. And I'm going to fold the paper towel here. And I am going to set the grease fitting or end of the hose on the paper towel itself. And I'm going to scroll in, and the back of the packaging states, as you press this trigger of the gun, you want to gently squeeze on the tube or grease itself to help prime the gun and the hose with grease without air. And I'll do that now. Go slow, be precise, don't make a mess. Again, all I'm going to do is press the gun. I'll scroll out and I'll show you. I'm going to simultaneously pull the trigger of the gun as well as gently squeeze on the grease tube. And you can feel it once the grease begins to get inside the gun and hose. There it is, I feel it now. And all I'm going to do is carefully and slowly continue pressing the trigger until grease comes out the tip. There it is, check that out. Set that down. And there we go. As you see right there, the grease has made it all the way to the very tip. Now to a full overview of the grease gun. Again, there it is, specifically designed for 8-ounce containers like this. And again, the grease has made it to the end of the hose where the fitting will mate and secure onto the grease fittings or ports on the outdrive. Spring-loaded gun. This is cool, DIYers. I definitely recommend it. Again, down below in the comment section and description section is a link on where to purchase this. Let's head out to the boat. DIYers, we're in the garage, and in front of us is my grandma's 1989 glass port, and it's got a 3.0 Mercruiser inboard, and on the very back it's got an Alpha 1 Gen 1 outdrive, as you see right there. And DIYers, we have been doing some heavy maintenance to this outdrive. We've rebuilt the upper unit, the lower unit, brand new trim rams, hydraulic lines, bellows, shift cable, water tube, gimbal bearing, and more. And today we are going to grease our fittings. And we've got one here adjacent to the starboard side trim center switch and hinge pin. Port side, we're missing a cap, but that's okay, we'll get a new one. And up top, on the very top portion of the transom, we have a grease fitting here that lubricates all the inner workings and moving parts inside there. And before I position the camera and get started, again, brand new trim rams and hydraulic lines, brand new anodes, as you see. Check that out. As well as the cavitational plate on the back. And hydraulic lines underneath the trim ram, all brand new. And what I'll do again is position the camera and we are going to grease our fittings. At this point, DIYers, a close-up view to the starboard trim center switch as well as the grease fitting. And we've got the starboard side bell housing, the transom, the gimbal ring, and the outdrive here. And before I actually hook up that grease gun to the fitting here, I am going to carefully remove the cap, and be very careful as you remove these. You can rip them right off and break them. As you see, it's just a cap with a lower loop that secures itself onto the fitting itself. So again, if you pry these plastic caps off too hard, you'll rip it off the loop. And from here, DIYers, it's kind of important to know, in the event that you have not greased your fittings in many years, or you have never greased your fittings, before you hook up your grease gun to the fitting itself and start pumping grease into the system, grab a little pick tool like this and just test the actual tip port, but be very careful not to push too hard. All I'm checking right now is that the fitting itself is not clogged with either dry sand, dry mud, or anything else. Make sure it's not corroded. And by pressing in the fitting with this little pointed tool, I'm just verifying it's ready for grease. And in our case, it is. Now to a very close-up view, and we have a center pin that will actually be compressed inward as I hook up that grease gun and fitting to carefully push grease into the system. And a quick step back and reposition of the camera, and before we start pumping grease into our grease fittings, I do want to show you the actual fitting on the end of the hose and the internal mechanism here. You can see 4 little tabs inside there. And as I push this on to the grease fitting itself, these little tabs are going to compress and add tension to the rear and beveled portion of the fitting itself, and basically lock this connection or fitting onto the grease fitting itself. So again, you will see just here shortly as I push this on to the fitting, I'm going to apply some friendly pressure until I hear a click and feel the internal tabs lock on the rear portion of the fitting. And I am in position. I'm going to carefully push that cap slightly away, and again, align it as straight as possible and push in with some friendly pressure until this fitting is locked in place inside this housing. As shown there, you heard the click, and I'll just verify it. And that looks good. From here, I'm going to ever so carefully and slowly pump grease into the system. And you can hear it going in. And once it gets to a point where it's hard to press or compress the trigger, do not pump it too hard. You could actually damage internal parts. So I'll give it one last little squeeze, and that is good. I will carefully grab the fitting here and pull it off the hard mounted fitting on the gimbal ring. And sometimes it can be a little tricky and stubborn. Just give it some jolting pulls. And I'll clean up any grease. I'll put the cap back on. And another reposition of the camera. And before we go all the way up top and grease the upper fitting for the top portion of the transom, I'm going to have to port side of the outdrive and gimbal ring where the trim limit switch is and grease that fitting. And again, grease gun in hand, and I'm just going to do the exact same thing as I just showed you starboard side. However, on port side, we don't have a cap to remove. We need to buy a new one. And the fitting is on and secured. And again, I'm going to carefully pump grease into the system. Do not over pump it. This one's pretty empty. and I'll assist the tube just a little bit and push in. And there it is, it's hard. I'm going to carefully remove it. Set that aside. I'm going to clean the grease off the fitting. And real quick, before we move on to the top fitting to grease that, I did grab this little tool and verify that there is no dry dirt or debris inside that port side fitting, and all look good. From here, I'm coming up top and ever so carefully removing that cap, as shown here, followed by just verifying that there is no dry dirt or debris, and that looks good. Followed by hooking up the grease gun. There we go. And just like starboard and port, go ahead and carefully pump grease into the system. In our case, I might have to add just a little bit of pressure to the tube to guide the grease up, and that's fine. And that grease is going in. And I'm going to continue pumping grease into the system. And I see the grease coming out the bottom. I'll take this off. And I'll clean up the cap and fitting. Cap it off. And clean up any excess that came out the bottom. And DIYers, as I move my outdrive starboard and port side, or right to left and left to right, there was always a unique and unfriendly sound right here that will hopefully go away now that we have greased that fitting. I'm going to hop in the boat and turn the steering wheel in hopes of working that grease in to alleviate that unfriendly sound. And DIYers is a big step back now, and that's it. That is how you grease your fittings. And we hope this helped. In addition, one more grease fitting right there on the starboard side transom. However, in our case, we have a set screw installed there to alleviate any option of ever greasing that point. And that is because during the gimbal bearing replacement, we removed the old style and greasable gimbal bearing and installed a newly engineered and designed gimbal bearing that is sealed and literally no longer requires to be greased, which in our opinion is pretty awesome. However, I will be honest, the old style gimbal bearing that was required to be greased through that little fitting right there, DIYers, all we had to do was hook our grease gun up to that fitting and pump grease into the system and through the passageway all the way to the gimbal bearing until it was topped off. In other words, the exact same step as we just did on the 3 fittings we showed in this video. So again, not that big of a deal when that time was taking place because it was normal. The newly designed gimbal bearing hadn't been engineered and designed yet, so we didn't know the difference. However, at this point, we have that newly designed and engineered sealed gimbal bearing installed inside the transom and bore that the yoke shaft now goes through, and we've got that new set screw installed, and we no longer have to grease that passageway and fitting. And in addition, if you've got a Gen 2 and the Bravo engines, you have additional grease port fittings. And with that said, spend a minute or two and go all the way around your transom, the gimbal ring, the bell housing, and outdrive, and locate all of your fittings. Or, better yet, reference your exact serial number service manual, and it will show you the exact location of all your fittings, which will help. And again, that's it, DIYers. Before we wrap the video up, I do want to talk about a few additional items that we are going to post down below in the comment section, as well as the description section. And that includes part 1 to our upper unit rebuild, part 1 to our lower unit rebuild, part 1 to our full bellows replacement project, which again consists of all the bellows, shift cable, water tube, and more. In addition, a link to the step-by-step process of properly and safely replacing your trim rams and their respective hydraulic lines shown on the very back there, as well as a link on how to replace your entire anode kit. And DIYers, anodes are extremely important to the life of your outdrive to alleviate corrosion and the outdrive falling apart. So take a look at your anodes, and if they are corroded, or in other words, they don't look brand new, it's time to replace them. So definitely check that out as well. And that's it. From here, do us a favor. Below the video, you will see that thumbs up icon. Click on that, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely ring your YouTube bell. That would be very helpful to us. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching. And one last thing, as you saw, there was a difference in grease. 24C is more of a tan and cream color or brown, and the grease we pushed out as we pushed the 24C in was more of a bolder blue or green, and that's just high performance grease. And when the boat was in the shop over the couple times the shop put that in there. However, again, we referenced our exact serial number service manual. Came with the boat when the boat was purchased, again, that day. And it said 24C, so that's what we did.